and organizations like the IPU, the UN, etc., to be able to come up with a mechanism that would relate each other's programs so we could shift to a low-carbon growth. Definitely, as I said yesterday, December, Copenhagen is a make or break thing. But then again, all these commitments, whether it is the HFA, the Yoga Framework for Action, with regards to disaster risk reduction, or the Kyoto Protocol, or second commitment, which they are doing in Copenhagen in December. These are commitments of nations, big and small, developed and developing, but since there is no punitive action, it would be very difficult for us to really seek the compliance of the developed nations. We must find a way so that these nations who have caused the pollution, who have caused the degradation of our resources, who have caused small atolls, countries like the Maldives and Kiribati and the others, to sink in 40 years. I'm not saying that they are solely responsible for this, but they are partly responsible that have caused the climate crisis. So we are all in this together, and coming from an archipelago which is greatly at risk, which is very vulnerable, but however contains the Amazon of the sea, so to speak, because we have the seas that are in the middle of the Coral Triangle that has the richest in biodiversity around the world, along with 6 other island nations in Southeast Asia. And therefore, this subject of low carbon growth is very apt, and we must find a solution and a mechanism so that we, from different regions of the world, must come up with a target, a plan that would be concretized and implementable after today's forum. I would therefore be more than willing to share the legislation that I have done as chair of the Climate Change Committee in the Philippine Senate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I should say that there's overwhelming scientific and technical reasons why we have to do something about the mitigation that is needed for climate change. Coming from a continent that, in my judgment, is exceedingly vulnerable in terms of all the key issues that have been mentioned in the last 1.5 days. We're dealing with a continent that literally 70% of the population is involved in agriculture, agroforestry, or work that is related to the land. Nearly 90% of all the energy that we use is from wood. It's obvious that something has to happen if we really want to talk seriously about low carbon growth. Now, we do have forests. What is left of it right now? And we are being told by everybody, don't cut the forest, don't touch it, don't do anything to it. But we do also know that without energy, we will never develop. Having said that, it's obvious that somebody has to pay me for not cutting that last tree in the forest. Now, who is really doing the major pollution worldwide? I'm sorry to say a lot of it is coming from the developed world. Now, I have these natural resources, the trees standing. And if I'm not going to touch them, I'm not going to eat. And if I'm not going to eat, then I'm going to starve to death, and I wouldn't be able to do anything. But I do also know that in the meantime, my trees are literally sequestering all the carbon that you are using, throwing into the atmosphere. If I'm not going to cut the tree, then please let us find ways and means of paying for it. Now, we in the developing world have an advantage of a late start. And I think you really don't want us to go through the same mechanisms that you used in developing to the level you are now. So we should put our collective knowledge together to say that it is in our total interest to find ways and means of ensuring that we develop a low carbon growth mechanism across the board. This is going to require some serious monies. Now, it turned out I was sort of involved with the Project Catalyst group in developing the various scenarios and so on and so forth. The amount of monies we are talking about is not small. And looking at the current financial crisis we are facing worldwide, I could see the reluctance of some of the major polluters not showing their head that they really want to do something. But in the last day or and a half, I've been thinking seriously about ways and means of presenting something to them at the meeting so that they may find it easier to digest the level of funding we are talking about. Now, our studies showed that we are talking about $60 to $90 billion a year in incremental costs and so on. And that is from 2010 to 2020. If we are working at that level, I'm afraid at this very moment, if I were from the developed world, I would say that, well, this is quite a big bill. How do I handle it? And so I was going to suggest from the word go, can we think of, first of all, the big picture, that is the big money, and secondly, to think about presenting it to them in low doses. Say we come up with a plan for the first 5 years and scale the monies down, and then do something that I was doing in a sense at the World Bank. I happened to be a little while ago the chairman of the inspection panel for the World Bank Group. And I'm always sniffing around to make sure that we are not wasting monies. But we can present it to them in, as I say, small doses, and also have a very transparent way of making sure that the funds are accountable, properly used, and measurable, so that at the end of the day, we could say that during the first 5 years, this is what we've been able to do with the money, and this may probably act as an incentive for the developed world to look at what we are talking about. Okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and good morning to everybody. I'm Salim ul-Haq. As David said, I'm a senior fellow at the International Institute for Environment and Development, based in London, but I'm come originally from Bangladesh. Most of my work has been looking at the impacts of climate change on developing countries, particularly the least developed countries, and hence the issue of adaptation. But I was, in the fourth assessment report of the IPCC, I was a coordinating lead author of a new chapter that was introduced in the fourth assessment that looked at mitigation and adaptation together. This had not done before. They were compartmentalized into different working groups of the IPCC in the past. And I think that that's a seminal issue, because we can't distinguish between mitigation and adaptation anymore, although different people, different countries, different communities may need to focus on one more than the other. But all countries are going to have to deal with reducing their carbon emissions to some extent. Every country is a polluter, some bigger than others.